Brazil long before Brazil. When we think about the history of Brazil, we almost always start in 1500, with Pedro Álvares Cabral arriving on the coast of Bahia. But what if I told you that the true history of Brazil began thousands of years before that? What we learned in school is only the tip of the iceberg. Before the Portuguese ever arrived, millions of people already lived in this land. They had rich cultures, complex social systems, and even trade networks spanning hundreds of kilometers. That common image of the isolated native in the forest is a myth that oversimplifies an incredibly sophisticated reality. Archaeologists have found evidence of large villages, organized agriculture, advanced pottery, and even urban-like settlements. Peoples like the Tupi, Marajora, and Tapajonic dominated vast regions. Some studies even suggest that parts of the Amazon had environmental engineering that made the forest more fertile. This video will take you on a journey to Brazil before it was Brazil, revealing how people lived here, who they were, and why our past is far more grand and complex than most imagine. So, you already know what to do. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because what you're about to discover will change how you see the history of our country. The first inhabitants and lost civilizations. The first inhabitants of what is now Brazil arrived more than 12,000 years ago, during the last ice age, likely migrating from Asia through North America. Over millennia, they formed hundreds of distinct peoples, each with its own language, traditions, and ways of life. One of the most fascinating examples is the Marajora culture, which thrived on Marajo Island in northern Brazil. They built entire settlements in the heart of the Amazon, creating artificial mounds to escape flooding, and left behind highly sophisticated pottery, considered among the finest in the Americas. In the upper Rio Negro, in the Xingu region, and parts of modern-day Mato Grosso, archaeologists found evidence of planned settlements, roads, and organized agricultural systems. The Amazon, often imagined as untouched wilderness, was in fact a human-shaped forest, with the famous Amazonian dark earth, terra preta, which remains fertile to this day. These civilizations reshaped the environment without destroying it, achieving a balance that Europeans would later struggle to maintain. And here's a surprising fact. When the first Portuguese arrived, they encountered organized villages, farms, and functioning trade networks, which had existed long before any European contact. This is a part of history that rarely appears in school books. If you find it amazing to imagine Brazil as home to advanced civilizations, comment below. Had you ever heard of the Marajora or Xingu peoples? And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, because the next topic will show how these peoples organized society and developed their own technologies. Technology, culture, and trade networks before the Portuguese. Many people still imagine that Brazil's indigenous peoples lived in complete isolation without any real technology. But research shows the opposite. They had science, planning, and complex networks of exchange. The peoples of the Amazon, for example, mastered advanced agricultural techniques, cultivating cassava, corn, fruits, and medicinal plants. They created the famous terra preta, a fertile black soil made through composting and charcoal, which is still a mystery and marvel to modern archaeologists. Beyond farming, trade networks connected different groups across Brazil and even other parts of South America. Marajora pottery has been found far from its original region, and rare stones and shells circulated between distant villages. Culturally, these peoples were rich in art, music, mythology, and spirituality. The rock art of Serra de Capivara, in Piauí, proves that artists and storytellers were active here at least 12,000 years ago. And here's something truly fascinating. Some researchers call these areas forest cities, because Amazonian villages, linked by rivers and paths, formed sprawling networks that blended into nature. This cultural and technological wealth proves that Brazil's history did not start with Europeans, but with creative, adaptive peoples. They had a sustainable way of life, inspiring even modern scientists to study how to live in harmony with the forest. If this part of our history surprised you, hit that like button, because in the next topic we'll talk about how the arrival of the Portuguese radically changed this world that had existed for thousands of years. The impact of European arrival. When Cabral arrived in 1500, he encountered a living, thriving land with millions of inhabitants. Estimates suggest that between 3 and 5 million people lived in Brazil before colonization. Yet within a few decades, everything changed. The arrival of Europeans brought diseases, violent conflicts, and brutal exploitation, causing indigenous populations to collapse. Entire peoples vanished, leaving traces only through archaeology. This encounter between worlds was also a cultural clash. The Portuguese failed to understand local ways of life, labeling them as savage, when in reality they were complex societies with advanced knowledge. Colonization destroyed forest cities, broke trade networks, and erased a history that we are only now beginning to uncover through archaeology, anthropology, and history. Understanding this past is crucial because it changes how we see Brazil. We are not a country that began in 1500. We are a land with thousands of years of history, shaped by civilizations that molded our forests, rivers, and soils long before Europeans arrived. If this time travel made you think, leave a like and subscribe, because uncovering these forgotten stories is essential to understanding who we truly are as a nation. Rediscovering the Brazil we were never taught. Now that you've learned about Brazil before 1500, it's clear that our history is far bigger than what traditional classes ever showed us. Intelligent, creative, and connected peoples transformed this land into a true mosaic of cultures. Learning about this past is not just about archaeology or curiosity, it's about identity. When we realize that our story didn't begin with Cabral, we start to truly value Brazil's cultural diversity and the indigenous peoples who still guard this millennia-old legacy. If you found this video eye-opening, share it with your friends and family. Most people have no idea about this part of Brazil's history. And before you go, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, because here we always go beyond what the school books tell you.